What's going on, people? My name is Alam. Welcome to another Emotional Football live stream. Today we got playoff landscaping, the third time that we've done it. It's a weekly fixture on this channel. So every Tuesday night we're gonna do a little stock watch for every team as far as how I think they're faring in terms of their playoff hopes. We're gonna do a little bit of landscaping, see where every team stands. Shout out to everybody that's watching live right now. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe to the channel on your way in. We're gonna get right to it. So typically when I've done this, I've started with the AFC. So we will stick with that way of doing things. But the way we're gonna have to switch things up is normally when we do this, we start with the absolute worst teams and we slowly build our way up. But as far as this game goes, or as far as this stream goes, I think there's only one place to start. And I think that place to start is the New York Jets. So this comes off the back of the news that Robert Saleh has been fired. Their head coach of a couple of years now is no longer going to be their coach. They put their defensive coordinator as the interim coach. Nathaniel Hackett is still there. Big up, Leon. So we got to sort out where we stand with the Jets. Now, this kind of conversation has to start at one place, and that is interim head coaches. And what do we think of interim head coaches? How do we feel about them? How do you frame the fact that they have a temporary coach? Because some people would look at the fact that they have an interim head coach and say, okay, you basically have a substandard coach. This guy's never been a coach for a reason. He's never been considered for a head coaching job for a reason. You have a substandard head coach, right? And then the other way to frame it is that like, oh, it's a fresh start for players and it's a new opportunity to establish accountability and all these things, right? So as far as how I feel about interim head coaches, that's a bad sign way more often than it's not. I think Antonio Pierce is one example of a good interim head coach. Rich Bisaccia is another example of a good interim head coach. And then I think there may be one other one. But this tends to be a bad thing more often than it's good. So I think the fact that their owner stepped in, apparently by himself on his own, and just fired the coach in the middle of nowhere is just like step one of what I think is going to be a descent into chaos. So I think, me personally, that this is bad for the Jets. And I want to start by putting them in don't think they'll make it. Now that might be adjusted as we go on. That's definitely possible. But I want to start with them there because again, I think this is not a good sign for that team. That they're willing that this is kind of how their season is going to pivot 5 games into the year. So yeah, that's where we had to start this time because the Jets just decided to do a little bit of chaos this morning. And then we'll go into the standings the way we normally do, which is from the bottom up. So there are 5 one-win teams. So we're going to start with the Bengals. And the Bengals, I put them in the gutter the first time we did this. Last time I took them out, and I talked about how one more loss does it. And Cincinnati, I'm putting you back there. I'm very confident Cincinnati will not make the playoffs. I thought that their defense showed more of the same, which is that they're a mess. They lost Dax Hill out for the year. Not that he was a particularly great player, but again, they lost him. He's not going to be there anymore. So they got weaker. We know the defense isn't going to be good. That I don't think there's much scope for improvement. When it comes to the offense, had a fairly good game, but Burrow ultimately turned it over in a big moment. Very discouraging game, all things considered. It's a home game against a division rival. You have to play Baltimore again this year in Baltimore, so that's a shaky setup for sure. And yeah, I'm very confident the Bengals won't make the playoffs. They're at 1-4. They're already behind the 8 ball. I'm going to put them in the gutter. Next team, Jacksonville. Do we need to say any more? This team is so bad they needed a curse to get them a win. For those of you guys who aren't familiar, the Colts had lost 10 games in a row in Jacksonville going into this game, and this is now the 11th year. So, it took that type of curse to get this team a win. They're playing bad ball. They got hooped on by ultimately, while they went up against one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, still got hooped on by a backup quarterback. Your offense had some big plays. Bigsby made some big plays, but it's not going to be enough. There's a lot of tension between the coaching staff and the players, it seems. So Jaguars, very confident they won't make it. The other one-win team, the Patriots, very comfortable putting them here as well. So we're going to put the Patriots in, very confident they won't make it. They're pivoting to Drake May. That's going to make them more exciting to watch. But their offensive line got weaker. Their offensive line got weaker. They could, I think they're probably pivoting to the better quarterback. So from a win standpoint, that's good. But they're 1-4. They're behind the 8 ball. Their offensive line, which at times had its weaknesses, or at times was, the reason their offense wasn't looking good, it got even worse. So very comfortable with putting the Patriots here. Other one-win team, the Browns. So we're going to make quick work of these teams. Browns, again, they belong here. I don't think this one needs much explaining. That team simply is just playing like shit right now. Quarterback is a mess. I'm sure there's a whole lot of tension in the room because of what's going on with the quarterback. The defense isn't looking like they did last year. The offense isn't looking, or the offensive line isn't looking the way they did last year. Nick Chubb will be obviously not healthy when he does come back. So the Browns definitely belong in this tier. And that leaves one last one-win team, which is Tennessee. So we're going to put Tennessee. Well, you know what? I think the quarterback situation is just too difficult. I actually really like a lot of what Tennessee has on their roster. Truthfully. If Tennessee had a respectable quarterback situation and they simply were just 1-3, I would probably put them in the tier above. But I'm so scared of their quarterback position, definitely putting them in the very confident they won't make it. So that knocks off 5 of the 16 teams already. There are only 11 more teams for 7 spots. So got to be careful with the numbers from this point onwards. I'm going to move on to the 2-win teams. So we already did the Jets. From here, we'll go to the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins picked up their 2nd win. Beat the Patriots by 5 points. Thought that there was improvement from for how the quarterback looked, but obviously they're not going anywhere with Huntley. Them making the playoffs is conditional on the fact that they get another quarterback. So whether that's Tua, whether that's another quarterback in the trade market, whether they sign somebody off the street, they have to get a new quarterback if they want to make the playoffs. And that's still up to this point not something that anybody's talked about or brought up. Hasn't been, the rumor hasn't been floated out there as far as we know. What's going to happen is that they're going to wait for Tua to come back. And that's, again, a complete unknown. So I want to put the Dolphins and don't think they'll make it, because I don't think they'll make it. By the time Tua gets back, or if they trade for the quarterback at early enough time, maybe that could change things for me. But where it's at right now, I don't see it. And then even if Tua does come back, there's going to be the concerns over how he plays and whether he can stay healthy. So I'm pretty pessimistic about the Dolphins situation right now. Willing to put them in. I don't think they'll make it. Another team, the Raiders. Raiders, I feel pretty good about putting in the same tier as well. It kind of looks like that team also has a lot of issues in the locker room. You got a player that wants out, a coach that's not afraid to talk about getting rid of players that seemingly aren't putting in a lot of effort. They're going to ultimately get worse when they pivot from Devontae. They just benched the quarterback. They benched the quarterback that they signed to play ahead of the quarterback that wasn't good enough last year. Like, you got Minshew because O'Connell wasn't good enough last year. And then this year you benched Minshew for O'Connell. So things aren't going good there. And again, I was very concerned when they hired Luke Getsy, and I'm still concerned for them. So we now have, that's 8 teams, right? We have 8 teams and don't think they'll make it. So there's only 8 teams left. And we haven't even got to the Broncos. Damn. Okay, this is crazy. We'll have to figure these numbers out. But maybe there's a lot of pessimism here. Who's the other 2-win team? Oh, the other 2-win teams are the Chargers and the Colts. I'm comfortable putting them in the mix. The Colts obviously have a very good backup quarterback. Whether Anthony Richardson plays or not, we expect that to not be an excuse. Shane Steichen, I think, has shown that he can get the most of some quarterbacks. Flacco seems, we saw last week, that he'll be one of those guys. Tough loss against Jacksonville, but again, they're cursed there. So it is what it is. I can't blame the Colts too much for losing at a place that they're cursed. That's the only thing that, could get Jacksonville a win. So I'm going to put the Colts at 2-2 or 2-3 in the mix. Chargers, they're the team that's 2-2. I think they definitely belong in the mix as well. There's a base level of competence that they've achieved with their new head coach. So I think you put the Chargers in the mix. And that leaves 6 teams left for us. And I guess we'll move to the 3-win teams. That brings the conversation to the Denver Broncos. And as of right now, they're the second wildcard team. I think they've won a couple games in a row now. Here's my stance on Denver. I talked about this yesterday. I thought Denver was an incompetent team last year. I think they've graduated from incompetence to being competent in that the coaching is solid. What they have on the roster seems to be enough to where, like, I don't think the roster is good, but it's not bad enough to get in the way of their coaching. So with that being the case, like, I look at Denver as this team is competent, and if you show up and you're a mess, they'll beat you. But I don't think that Denver is the team that'll actually show up and just like outdo a good team. I don't think that's possible for them. So despite being 3-2, I don't think the Broncos will make it. So that knocks off 9 teams. There's only 7 teams left here. I think clearly I have quite a bit of pessimism. I'll sort out these last 3 teams or these last 5 teams, and then we may have to rethink some of these teams here because this is a little bit heavy towards the bottom. The Pittsburgh Steelers. I once upon a time had Pittsburgh Steelers in. I'm confident that they'll make the playoffs, or very confident they'll make the playoffs. The last 2 weeks have kind of been disappointing. I think the Colts was disappointing from the fact that I thought offensively I was okay with what happened, but their defense, how they played against Indianapolis, I thought that was concerning. And then what I saw against Dallas was even more concerning. The fact that the Cowboys, without a functional running game against the Cowboys weren't able to run the ball against some other teams, right? The fact that was their situation, they didn't have Brandon Cooks, and they actually had an okay time moving the ball against Pittsburgh, and they scored 20 points, and they scored the game-winning touchdown when they needed it the most. I thought that was disappointing when I look at Pittsburgh's defense, which I thought was much better than they've been in the last few years. So that was disappointing. And then when I think about Pittsburgh's offense, you went up against a Dallas team that basically didn't have pass rushers. Michael Parsons was out. DeMarcus Lawrence was out. They lost Nealand in the middle of the game. So you went up against a team without pass rushers. And again, you didn't have a good offensive game. So I'm going to put Pittsburgh in the mix. I still think, obviously, they're going to have a winning record because that's just what Mike Tomlin does. I still maintain that they have better pieces than they've had in the last few years. But these last 2 weeks have definitely brought them back down to earth for me, and I'm not as confident as I once was. So this leaves us with only 4 teams that are even at the think they'll make it stage. So I'm definitely going to have to revisit this. Just going to go ahead and put the Chiefs under very confident. Self-explanatory, nothing needs to be said there. Also going to put Houston there because these are the 2 teams that have more than 3 wins. What I'll say about Houston, though, and I've said this, I think I said this last time we did this stream on Tuesday, and then I said it again during the Monday Night Football watch-along. The thing about Houston is they're not playing particularly great football. They're not. I think they've won every game that they've won. It's been a close game. It's been a 1-score game. A few of them have been field goal games. And the loss that they had was a blowout. So I actually think that it's impressive that Houston, despite not playing their best ball, are still getting wins. They still have 4 wins. That's impressive, but they haven't quite played the ball that they were playing towards the end of last year. And that's definitely something that I keep in mind when I talk about them being a contender, because we have to see them get better. By the end of the year, they have to be playing better ball than they are right now. If they kind of just stay at this level going towards the end, I actually don't have a lot of faith in them beating a Kansas City in the playoffs. Kansas City also needs to show improvement, but they have enough credit in the bank for us to know that, hey, that's a safe bet that that's going to happen. A team like the Texans, we don't quite know that about them yet. So while I'm very confident that they'll make the playoffs because of their record, yeah, I don't know at all if, I'm not putting them in the same tier as Kansas City when it comes to playoff teams. Just wanted to make that clear. But yeah, Houston, we know that they got better on paper than they were last year. They were able to bring back a lot of what they, if not bring back what they had last year, either replace it or upgrade it in free agency. So yeah, this team definitely belongs in this tier. Very confident. Bills and Ravens, gonna put those teams, you know what? I'm going to put Bills in, I think they'll make it, and Ravens in, very confident they'll make it. And here's why. So in terms of being very confident about the Ravens have already shown this year that they have some weird things going on in terms of, like, if you look at last year, they lost to the Colts and Gardner Minshew, kind of out of the ordinary loss. You didn't really expect that. You think they're better than that. Their loss against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh was much of the same. Like, they're a very good team that has it in them to play down to their competition or to play down to inferior competition. They've kind of done it again this year. They lost to the Raiders, which, Gardner Minshew. Who else did they had one other game that wasn't quite a loss, but kind of fits that billing. Oh yeah, the close game against the Cowboys. You had a close game against the Bengals here, who a lot of people don't think are a good team. So the Ravens, they have the tendency to play down to their competition sometimes, but you saw it against Cincinnati. Lamar is just so good when he's on. Derrick Henry, they're starting to figure out how to use. They've adjusted as the year's gone on. Lamar is like more of a shotgun quarterback, because when you have him hand the ball off, you want there to be a threat of him keeping the ball every single time. To make a backside defender commit to Lamar. So you always want Lamar in the shotgun, but Derrick Henry is the opposite. You want him in the I formation. You want him, building up momentum, gathering a head of steam, running at the line of scrimmage with the ball. So I think they've slowly began to accommodate Derrick Henry, and he's getting going, and that's benefiting the team. So I think they're trending in the right direction when it comes to their offense. Hopefully they figure out how to get the weapons going. Mark Andrews, MIA. Isaiah Likely finally got his he got 2 touchdowns, but even his production dropped off after week 1. You want to see them get their weapons involved, but yeah, I'm very sure Baltimore makes the playoffs, having seen what I've seen. That leaves one team. It leaves Buffalo. So I think they'll make it because ultimately they have 3 wins, which is already more than a bunch of teams in their conference. It was a close game against Houston. Josh Allen was very concussed. But I think the last 2 weeks have been very disappointing. They had big blowouts in week 2 and week 3. It felt like they ended 2 AFC teams' seasons. So that was good. But last 2 weeks, you saw a beatdown against Baltimore. Obviously, that's self-explanatory. That's a really bad sign. And then the way they lost to Houston, again, the caveat here is that Josh Allen, you can see it. He got concussed, and he shouldn't have been playing in the game. But, he still was out there, and you still saw him go 9 for 30, and you still saw the weapons, them having a hard time getting the weapons in the game. You still saw James Cook be relied on, but really not be able to carry. Like, James Cook, I think, is a very good player, but he's not the kind of running back that'll carry an offense. So you have that issue. I think given Buffalo's history and what we have seen from this team so far, we're not looking at them in a vacuum. We're thinking about them in the context of, we've seen what this team has been in the past and how their seasons ended. So I think that kind of takes the luster off of Buffalo. Again, I do think they'll make it, but I see their issues with their weapons. I see their issues with their issue with their defense sometimes, and it's concerning. I think what we learned against Baltimore is that a power rushing attack can definitely beat up on Buffalo's run defense. And fortunately for them, Houston was missing Joe Mixon. I think if they had Joe Mixon and they could really run the ball, that game may have been a blowout, just like Baltimore was. So I'm gonna put Buffalo, and I think they'll make it. It would be, it would be better for them if they had you know what? Actually, I'm gonna change this right now. I said all that, but you know why I'm changing it, guys? Look how low I have the rest of their division. Look how low I rank the rest of their division. So I have to say I'm confident that they'll at least win their division with how lowly I rate their division. Okay, guys. See, on the fly thinking, people, we figured out how we felt in the moment. So you know what? I'm gonna put Buffalo there, despite what I just said, because look, their division is just too rough. So okay, we have to now reconsider this a little bit because it's very lopsided. I think I'm very down on some teams, and I could maybe slide some teams up. And I think where I'll start with the Jets and putting them in the mix. And the reason I'll do that is, while I'm very discouraged by the fact that they fired their coach, I do think they're going to make an all-in push. I think they're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline. They have a 40-year-old quarterback. There's no such thing as thinking about the future when you have a 40-year-old quarterback. But also, if you think about the general manager and, well, not, I was going to say the coach, but the coach is fired. But if you think about the general manager, his back's against the wall as far as his job goes anyways. He should just trade anything and everything he can trade. Because, look, if it doesn't work, he's not going to be there anyways. You either go all in and win a Super Bowl and learn to, deal with it after the fact like the Rams, or you get fired and it's somebody else's problem. So the Jets are probably going to be aggressive at the deadline. They're probably going to be better. You would think that firing the coach would give them maybe it could give them a boost. I'm a little bit skeptical of that. Again, I don't think there's a long history of interim head coaches being successful. But okay, I'll put the Jets in the mix. And I'm going to put the Broncos in the mix. Let me look at their schedule. Okay, we're going to check this. We're going to check this really quickly. Chargers, they play the NFC South. So they play the Chargers, then they play Spencer Rattler's Saints, then they play the Panthers. Ooh, Ravens and Chiefs is tough. But then they got Falcons, Raiders, Browns, Colts, Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs. You know what? I got to put the Broncos in the mix. Just because they have 3 wins already, there's potential to get more wins. I think this tier of the AFC, it's not like there's vastly superior teams and a bunch of them. So I think the Broncos can be put in the mix. I'm comfortable with where I have the Dolphins and the Raiders. I'm going to keep them there. If I were to move a team, it would be the Dolphins, but I'm too scared of that quarterback situation. So okay, I'm comfortable with this being where the AFC is at. Shout out to everybody in the chat. If you guys have any thoughts on this, if you guys would move any teams around, feel free to put that input in the chat. We'll revisit this after the fact, but I think this is where I'm going to keep the AFC right now. Yeah, I have a pretty big gap there. I have no teams that I think I'll make it. I'm either very confident or, I just have to put you in the mix. I don't really think you'll make it. I just know you have a chance. So we're going to go to the NFC teams now. Again, we'll revisit the AFC teams after the fact if the chat heats up at some point. But okay, when it comes to these NFC teams, we're going to start at the bottom again. The 2 1-win teams. So you got the Panthers and the Rams. Panthers, like I said, people, we did this show for the first time off the back of their win against the Raiders. And I did not let that fool me. This team, their performance against the Raiders, they have that in them to do here and there, but their baseline is going to be what we've seen in every other week, which is a team that has a handful of significant enough issues. And then they lost Shaq Thompson. They lost Derek Brown, 2 of their better players on defense. So very confident the Panthers won't make the playoffs. The Rams at 1 win. I'm going to check their schedule because, again, they're missing 2 tackles. They're missing 2 receivers. They are definitely going to get healthy. They have a bye week, and then they play the Raiders, Vikings, Seahawks, Dolphins, Patriots, Eagles, Saints, Bills, Niners, Jets, Cardinals, Seahawks. You know what? Okay, just because they have a level of coaching and a level of talent that I have respect for, I can't put them in very like their record warrants it, but I'm gonna put that in don't think they'll make it. I'm gonna put them in don't think they'll make it. Um, yeah, I can't put it in put them in very confident that they won't because we'll get to it, but I don't think that there's teams that are gonna run away with the wild card spots. There's an outside chance they could make it if they catch fire. And again, I don't think there's enough really like superior NFC teams to where if you look at their schedule, it's like, oh, they have a bunch of games that they just can't win. So I'm going to put the Rams and don't think they'll make it. Oh my God. In the standings, in the NFC, the team with the third worst record on paper is actually the San Francisco 49ers. That's crazy. So the fact that they're there already is nuts. And then when you think about their team, there's no saying we're going to get McCaffrey back. We don't know that. Um, Hufanga, the safety, is out for a month. What other injury issues do they have going on? Okay, those are the main injury issues. But we've seen that their front seven is significantly weaker than it's been in the past. We've seen that the level of coaching on the defensive side of the ball is not the same. Big drop off there. They just lost to Funga for a month. They're losing games in this beat up state. I don't think I can put the Niners in any better category than in the mix. They have a chance to make it, but the confidence is not there. I can't sit here and say that I think they'll make it because, like I said, we're not used to seeing their team and saying, they don't have a good front seven. And it's hard to say a team with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa doesn't have a good front seven, but two people can only do so much, especially when your level of coaching doesn't match the way it's been for a long time. This organization went from Salah to D'Amico, I think, right? It was that order? Yeah, no, Salah to D'Amico to Steve Wilkes. That's phenomenal. And then I forget the name of the guy they hired, but he does not belong in that list. So we're putting the Niners in the mix. The next team by record is the Giants. So the Giants, this is tough. Because my kind of point recently about the Giants is that I actually think that they've graduated from where they were last year. Last year they were completely and utterly incompetent. This year, it's not that. If you look at their games, I think the only game that looks really bad is the loss against the Vikings where they got blown out. And the argument could be made that losing against the Vikings is not really a damning indictment. If you look at Daniel Jones's play so far this year, and I can't believe I'm making this point, but I'm going to pull up his game log. Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones has, since week 1, has only thrown one pick. He is, I think, like hovering around, again, since week 2, 24 for 34, 29 for 40, 23 for 34. He's not good because that's just not possible for Daniel Jones. But Daniel Jones has cleaned up some of the just self-defeating things that he's done in the past. So it's interesting because I don't think the Giants really have a chance to make it, but that's just because they don't have enough good. I think they've cleaned up some of the bad with their team, and I don't think they're playing as bad as they were last year. So I'm still putting them in, and I'm very confident they won't make it, but I don't think they're the same team that they were last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if they get some wins that people don't expect from them. Next team in the standings for the NFC. I'm going bottom up, people. The Arizona Cardinals. So the Cardinals, I think, came off back-to-back games before this week that were pretty disappointing. Actually, no, I lied. The Washington game was the big disappointment, the way they lost to Washington. But, we might be learning that Washington's actually a good team. And then when they played a beat-up Niners team, they beat them. So they're sitting at 2 wins. That's ultimately only 1 game out of the playoff spot. I think my issue with the Cardinals is that when I see them have games like this, I think about what could have been. My comments about them in the offseason were, I think that last year you got the ball rolling a little bit towards the end of the season. You got the ball rolling. You kind of had, you You were leaning, like you were heading in the direction of figuring things out and achieving competence, right? But then in the off season, you barely got better on paper. Like I think they were perfectly primed to have the kind of off season where a team adds a bunch of talent and just again takes their 53-man roster to another level. And I don't think they did that. I actually think that they signed a few players that make them a little bit better, but they kind of left their roster in a similar spot. And that's the big issue for me. The big issue for me is I just think that at times their coaching can be really good. At times their quarterback play can be really good. They have some weapons that are going to do some things here and there, but simply they just don't have the roster, despite the fact that they have 2 wins and they just beat the Niners. So I'm putting the Cardinals in. Don't think they'll make it. But again, they literally just beat the Niners. And I think if they, again, like I would have them much higher if they had the offseason that they should have had. Shout out to Peter. Peter says, fuck the Bengals now and forever. Hell yeah, man. We got the Bengals and very confident. Okay. So, I mean, we'll probably add the category at some point, but I won't be typing it though. Let's just make that clear. We'll let Peter share his screen and Peter can type that out if he wants. But yeah, we got the Bengals in the gutter of the AFC for sure. We'll revisit that if you want later. After I finish up the NFC, we'll maybe look at the AFC and see what you think. But shit, yeah, okay. Next team in the NFC. The Saints. Okay, so the Saints just lost Derek Carr for like how many weeks? I think they said a few weeks. They're just about to probably lose against Tampa Bay, so that sucks. They're 2-3, but I think that Derek Carr injury that's deflating. I think they're gonna pick up losses. They're gonna play Spencer Rattler apparently. I lied. I think I said Hayner before. Yeah, they're gonna play Spencer Rattler apparently. We've seen the team come back down to earth. Their defense can be solid, but it's not a great defense. I don't think they have enough weapons on offense. So the Saints fall under. Don't think they'll make it. I think the injury is a backbreaker. The next team on this list is the Eagles. So I'm going to put the Eagles in. I think they're in the mix. Yeah, again, this is a team that has lost 10 of their last 13 games. That's happened for a reason. The team has issues. The team has a whole lot of talent, but the coaching issues are real. And yeah, I can't sit here and say that I think they'll make the playoffs. Like I'm with the way Washington is playing. If we don't win the division, I'm genuinely not sure about the wild card spots. So I think they're in the mix with San Francisco, and that's where I'm going to leave them. Next team we got is the Packers. So I think the Packers are in a weird place where you look so solid with Malik Willis. It looked like, okay, if this team can play like this without Jordan Love, imagine how they'll look with Jordan Love, right? And then oddly enough, I think Jordan Love has came back and played okay ball. So it makes you wonder, is this is the idea that they could have been what they were with Willis and just better with Love? Is that possible? Like Love is a very different quarterback. Is what they were doing with Willis maybe just a product of the fact that was something new and unique from this personnel, the way they were playing with Willis, and not something they can replicate with Jordan Love? I think the Packers, you can't think about their playoff potential without acknowledging the division and how good their division is in terms of the NFC. I think it's definitely the strongest division in the NFC. So I think I'm comfortable with putting the Packers in. I think they'll make it. You know what? I think I'm going to revisit that one, but yeah, I think let me look at their schedule. Like they had a close win against the Rams, which doesn't look good on paper. But Jordan Love just went full Wentz and just handed the Rams 7 points for no reason. Yeah, I think as of right now, I got the Packers there, but I'm probably gonna revisit that. The next team is Dallas. You know what's wild? I actually think that Dallas, in terms of their playoff chances, the win against Pittsburgh was super impressive. So many injuries in Pittsburgh, weird situation with the weather. We didn't think they could run the ball based on what we saw before this game. And then against Pittsburgh, of all teams, you break out Rico Dowdle or Dowdell. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but you just like break the glass in case of emergency and hand him the ball. He ends up running the ball effectively. You had no pass rushers, right? Michael Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence didn't play. Their rookie, Marshawn Kneeland, got an injury in the middle of the game. So you're missing out on all these edge rushers. You show up in Pittsburgh and you still get the job done. So I want to put Dallas in. I think they'll make it for that reason. Again, I'm going to revisit these. But yeah, I think I was really impressed with what Dallas did against Pittsburgh, and I'm surprised what I'll say that as well, because I expected. I think I said here on this platform on last Thursday Night Football, that like if the Steelers don't win by 2 scores, there's a problem with Pittsburgh, because Dallas was beat the hell up and had not shown a lot of good things before that. So yeah, that's the point there. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'd feel so confident about if they could have got that win. They just could have got that win against the Falcons that they came so close to getting. But they found a way to lose a really winnable game. It was a really stupid game from them. Like, if you think about how they lost that game, or not a stupid game, a stupid ending. If you think about how they lost that game, if you think about how bad of a loss they had against Denver, they've just had these weird moments. Like, they're 3-2, and the argument could be made that you should be beating Denver, and you easily could have won that game against Atlanta. Like, fine margins, not fine margins because they got beat up against Denver, but like, the team should have a better record. I'm gonna obviously the thing to consider with them is that. Okay, the Saints injury, I think, again, it knocked them down for me. So if you think about Tampa versus Atlanta, I really wanted to put Tampa in, I think they'll make it, and Atlanta in the mix. But Atlanta just beat Tampa. So I think that kind of complicates that for me. I don't really know how I want to maneuver that. But that's really how I feel about the teams. So I think I'm just going to do it anyways. Fuck it. Man, I feel good about Tampa. I think they'll make the playoffs. Next team. Oh, the Bears. I think I had the Bears and very confident they won't make it the entire year thus far. I'm gonna bump them up to don't think they'll make it, and the reason is because they figured out how to run the ball. A big part of my argument for the fact that, or the big part of my, like, a big justification for me for being very confident they won't make the playoffs is that they couldn't run the ball at all in the first 3 weeks. It was downright horrendous. They're averaging like less than 2 yards a carry. And I just thought that was unworkable. But they found a way to get the running game going. I'm sure that's going to obviously help Caleb Williams out. I don't know if they've been scheming up quicker throws for Caleb with the offensive line, but he's starting to get more productive as well. I still think the offensive line is too big of a problem for them this year when it comes to the idea of making the playoffs. But yeah, I'm putting them in. I don't think they'll make it because I still don't I think jumping them up from very confident they won't make it to in the mix is just too big of a jump for 1 week. But I'm putting the Bears in. I don't think they'll make it. The next team is the Lions. So the Lions are in the same division as the Vikings. So that's tough for them from a record standpoint. I think, again, no confidence that they'll win the division for that reason. In terms of them being in a wild card spot, yeah, I feel pretty good about that. So I think that justifies putting them in. I think they'll make it. Like I said, when you look at these teams, the wild card race is murky. Like, the reason to be confident a team will make it is if you're confident that they'll win the division. Or if they're just so good that you feel like if they don't win the division, I feel really good about them being in the wild card spot. You know what? That is how I feel about Detroit. We're putting Detroit in the top tier. I feel the same way about Minnesota. You know what? I'm putting Minnesota in there with them. I feel like those two teams, one of them is winning their division, the other one is just going to be the 5 seed. Yeah, I when I think about them versus all these other teams, I feel pretty good about them. And again, a part of it is that it is the records. Minnesota's 5-0, Detroit's 3-1. They're already ahead of the 8 ball, and they have a bunch of these teams here. That if I just look at them, I think they're either at par or better than a lot of them. So that's that with those teams. Seattle. So Seattle, I'm going to put in the mix. And here's my justification for that, right? You're 3-2. You lost your last 2 games. Losing against the Giants at home, I think that's pretty horrible. I think that's a pretty horrible result. Losing to the Lions on the road, you know what? It's not ideal. You definitely got outplayed, but it's okay. It's okay to lose against Detroit in Detroit in a primetime game. That's okay, right? But beating Skylar Thompson's Miami Dolphins by 21 points is nothing to like gas. That's an okay game. Beating the Patriots in overtime is discouraging. Beating the Broncos by 6 points, you know, in hindsight, maybe that's okay. But at the time, I thought that was a pretty disappointing game. I say this all to say, I think Seattle's only had one game that I think has been okay. Actually, no, they've had 2 games that I think are okay, which is a loss to the Lions on the road and beating up on Miami, who had no quarterback. So I really don't think Seattle's put a lot of good ball out there. And I don't feel comfortable putting them in any other tier than this. I think they belong here, and they are like squarely in the mix. So that leaves 2 more teams. I'm going to do Washington next. I'm going to say Washington, I think they'll make it. I think they're playing good ball. I think that their schedule is really easy. So they're 4-1 right now. And look at their games upcoming, right? They have Baltimore. That's really tough. But then after Baltimore, you got Carolina, Chicago, the Giants, the Steelers. Then there's a couple of divisional games against the Eagles and the Cowboys, which you could say they have decent chances against those teams. But then you got the Titans, the Saints, then the Eagles, Falcons, Cowboys. The Commanders have a good schedule. They have a lot of wins. I feel pretty good about the Commanders making the playoffs. I'm not going to put them in the very confident they'll make it tier yet, because there's still some potential for the fact that there's still some potential for things to go wrong, because they're a very new team. And what I mean by that is that new head coach who's running a new defensive scheme, new offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator has a rookie quarterback that nobody's seen any tape of. A whole lot of stuff is new about this team. And because that's the case, there's a potential for the fact that a part of the reason they're playing good right now is because people don't have tape on them. And that over the course of the year, you're going to see teams get a better understanding of what they like to do, a better understanding of how to take those things away, and that could drop their level of play. So that's the only reason I'm taking them away from very confident they'll make it. When you think about the 2 teams that I have up there, Detroit and Minnesota, part of the reason I feel so confident about those teams is the fact that they're not new teams. Like they're not teams that are taking teams by surprise. We know who the Lions and the Vikings are, and they're beating teams regardless. So that's why Minnesota's or Washington's in that second tier. And then Atlanta, last but not least, I'm putting Atlanta in the mix. They seem to have a flair for the dramatic. I think every game they've been in has been a 1-score game, except maybe Pittsburgh. Yeah, well, no, Pittsburgh was a 1-score game as well. So they've been in all 1-score games. They got the Panthers coming up again. Actually, no, they get to play the Panthers twice from this point onwards. They're already 3-2, building a bit of momentum. So, you know, even though they just beat Tampa Bay, I still think Tampa's a better team. They're a more established team. I just trust Tampa Bay a bunch more. And again, Tampa honestly really should have won that game. So I'm not willing to put Atlanta on par with Tampa. But you got to acknowledge that they at the very minimum have a chance. So I like how this broke down. I think this is much more even. You got the 2 teams that you're confident belong in the gutter. You got the 2 teams that you're confident about in the playoffs. And then you got a pretty big mix in the middle with a good, even distribution. So, yeah, I like how these are looking. Shout out to the 10 people in the chat right now. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. This is Playoff Landscaping, a weekly fixture on this channel where we kind of take stock of where every team stands. We do a little bit of the landscaping here to see where, to see where each team lies in the landscape. But yeah, I just realized my camera was frozen and it unfroze. But yeah, so I can switch back to the AFC. If you guys have any input or ideas, you think teams should be in other spots, feel free to let me know. We can maybe discuss where teams belong. If you guys are really strongly opinionated about this stuff, we can switch some teams around. I can go back to the AFC for anybody who joined midway and may have missed it. But I have the AFC in a pretty interesting position. I think I feel strongly about a lot of these teams. I think we put Baltimore in. I think they'll make it last week because they simply just didn't have enough wins. They were a 2-2 team. But yeah, at 3-2 feels like enough for me to put you up there. And again, another thing to keep in mind is that I think you have to think about every team's division when you think about their playoff prospects. And for their sake, they have 2 teams in the very confident they won't make it in their division. And then a Pittsburgh team that I think their stock for me took a big shot. So I feel pretty good about Baltimore. But that's what it is, people. This is a weekly fixture on this channel. We're going to do this every Tuesday. I might run a little bit late like today. Normally I like starting the stream at like 7:38. Had to run at 8:30. So if you guys don't see it until last minute, know it's definitely going to happen for sure. I'm always going to be out here. But yeah, if you guys don't want to miss out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Know whenever I go live. We will be back live on the channel on Thursday for a Thursday Night Football watch along / Week 6 preview, where we're going to watch the game, hang out, unpack every game that's going to happen on Sunday. And then I just realized I don't think I'll be able to do Monday Night Football. So I might have to do Sunday Night Football. I didn't want to do Bengals Giants, but I think I might have to. So Sunday Night Football, we will be here to talk about the Sunday games. So that stream is a watch along for the game and then a recap of all the football that happened on the Sunday. So that's the programming. Again, make sure you hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And I hope to see you guys in the chat soon. These are always interactive streams, man. The streams are much more fun when the chat's active. It's a conversation. It's a back and forth. Talking at you guys, I'll do it, but I really prefer not to. So again, make sure if you guys are watching this, you guys get all your thoughts out there. It always makes for a better time. But yeah, I'll catch you guys around. See you guys hopefully on Thursday.